use this a lot in mythologies. Now, you see, what happened was that the ferocity of this battle between the gods had tremendous ferocity and totally is recorded in these legends as being devastating, no matter where you go, all the texts. And remember when we said that after the destruction, or even the first deluge, when these beings came here, they came to a foreign planet, remember. The planet's size may be different. Its ultraviolet rays, the Schumann waves, may be different. They may be in a part of the galactic center that they don't know where they are, the galactic wing. The stars look different. They're really trapped. They have the ability to get off the planet, but they don't know where they are. So originally monuments were created. When they set up Atlantis here, these monuments began to be created for one specific reason. What do you do when you're lost? Right? You need to find a compass, right? Or a map. They're lost in the galaxy. So they started creating what we now know as the Great Earth Circles, these monuments and ancient sites, so that they could find out where they were, because that takes a long time. You're dealing with astrophysics and astronomy. They're very looking at the motion of the sun during the year. You know, when they saw the sun, just to find out what the cycle of the sun is would take them a whole year of daily observations. So they built these rocks and stone, these monuments, to map out exactly what the cycles are on this new planet that they're in. That's why there's so many of them. And plus they had plenty of slaves to do it, to haul those rocks, and they had magical powers and spacecrafts to carry them in. So they put these things together. To them it was easy. And then they would have their shamans, what we now know as the priests, their priests, sitting in and making these astronomical calculations for the navigation that was coming for that purpose, to know what area they were in. And that's why a lot of these buildings were built. Some were built before. Now, don't you understand? Somebody will go, okay, but then how come they're still standing? Because now you're saying there was a deluge, right? Well, let's take the pyramid and the Sphinx as a perfect answer to that. Obviously, the pyramid was built after the deluge, but anyone know the latest research on the Sphinx? They were talking about all the water damage that it seems to have had. Yeah, you familiar with that? That's right, because that was what? That was built before. And that's going to go for all the countries. Some are totally ruined and devastated because they were built before, others came afterwards. And that's why these were done, for markings, alignments, to find out where the stars are rising, what constellations, what's going on. It's just a simple thing that you would do. Now, it turns out that when the Adamic race was seduced away, one interesting anecdote is that they did not stop wanting servants, the original masters. They went back to the drawing boards for a fourth time. And this time they really thought about what they had done wrong. Why is this always happening to them? Why they can't just have their servants, their slaves, to do what they want on this earth? And they discovered that, look, I think the fundamental problem was we've been crossing our DNA with the humanoids on this planet, right? But there's lots of other creatures on this planet, other fauna. So they start making researches into the other fauna on this planet, screening and checking into their DNA and their blood and all of the rest of it. And to cut a long story short, and they did this with, if you read J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings with educated eyes, you're going to read something amazing in there. They did this with a lot of different animals for different purposes. That's where we get our unicorn, our minotaur, you know, all the centaur creatures coming out of. That's what they were doing. And they were alive right down to even the Middle Ages. But they found that what we call the Earth reptile had specifically good DNA for them to cross with. And they did. And they created what we know to be the reptilians. So again, ladies and gentlemen, when you're hearing about the reptilians visited our planet, and the reptilians are coming, disinformation or just lack of research. We were not invaded by any reptilians. The reptilians are created on the planet Earth by the visitors. They are not the visitors. They are a group that was created by them later on. And you know the reptile is cold-blooded, right? Have you ever noticed that you can steal the children of a reptile mother right in front of her and she just stares right into space? You've heard the term cold-blooded, right? So when they crossed this, then they had the perfect servant. A being that was very powerful, very strong, and no conscience whatsoever. And these reptilians were their servants for a long, long time. And now some of them did look very reptilian, by the way. This does happen, that when they created this fourth race, some of them would look very, very reptilian in their eyes and their hands. But again, because they were using humanoid DNA, alien DNA, aliens look humanoid, a lot of them look very, very humanoid. In fact, you could be standing beside one today and not know it. The ones who look more reptilian, right, they're gone. They're underground now. Well, in fact, they were phased out. Around about the Middle Ages, they were still around. That's where you get all the stuff about the knights and the heroes going to have to fight with some demon knocking on the door and having to fight a dragon or something like that. Yeah, because these characters are still around. Mythologies are full of it. But as the industrial age came up, you can't have these characters walking the streets. So, right, so they phased them out. But the ones that look, and they're still born, some of them, but the humanoid ones, you could be standing right beside them and wouldn't know it unless your intuition tells you there's ways. As psychics and people like that will tell you. And as it says in Clement, and on earth shall be monsters, a generation of dragons of men, and likewise of serpents. From another famous writer. Now let's conclude by looking at the post-Diluvian epoch, see if we can get through a little bit of this. Obviously, we're not 11,000 years ago anymore, are we? We're talking about this in the 21st century. So, if there indeed was a war of the gods, if I'm telling you truth, if the evil came into humankind due to this genetic manipulation, and like I got more to say about that, it's just, we have such a short period of time about all the euphemisms in the Bible and what have you. But if in fact this did happen, why is it that neither side seems to have then triumphed? It's over, 50,000 years later since they arrived here, and certainly 12,000 years ago since they got into the War of the Gods. I just wanted to sketch the background and show you how many texts actually talk about the War of the Gods, because if I was just telling you it, you wouldn't get it. It's there. It's in the records. But why are we 11,000 years later still talking about this? If evil had triumphed, right, the serpent masters of God, we'd all have no problem. We'd all be slaves, working in mines, and no worries, right? Completely over and done with. Evil would be all over the world. And if the good side had won, well then we'd all be living in peace and harmony, wouldn't we? In a paradisical civilization. Neither which are true. We have the schizophrenia I was talking about earlier. Each one of us have it inside. And it's collective and it's political and it's found in every corner of the globe. Well, this is because of an unforeseen variable. And that is what it is. When this thermonuclear war that probably involved even weapons we don't know about, and a lot of psychic stuff, when you read the Celtic legends, they're talking about a lot of stuff coming even out of the mind. In magical wars. But with an emphasis on technology, on hardware, don't doubt that. An unforeseen variable occurred. The violence of these people awoken the violence of the earth. Remember the first deluge I told you was an atrocity? It's mentioned in all the records of how the animals and people died. But it did subside after a while. It changed the earth. But it subsided after a few hundred years. This violence, they say that the radiation from the weapons incinerated the entire atmosphere. All the moisture in the atmosphere was totally irradiated. And this affected the magnetic aura of the earth and the Roche limit. And the earth careered off of its axis and went into what we call the pole shift situation. And then when it shifted its pole, Mars was affected, and all the other planets spun out of control, which they still look like they have an influence from this. But what happened even more importantly? The Roche field sent out its magnetic powers, its magnetic energy, and the Van Allen belt, the asteroid belt that we talked about earlier on, now it's sucked back all that debris from the lost planet of Tiamat, and all the ice and all the water, and all of that planet's debris, trillions of tons of this stuff. I've got, in my book there and on this website, endless quotes from legends, exactly specifically talking about this. We just don't have time to show them all. But it's all in the manuscript. This stuff poured into the earth, and that's why they talk about the 40 days of rain, how the earth stood still in the sky and man couldn't see even his brother's face and all of that. But this deluge of water fell in now with a vengeance, and it was so powerful that it created unbelievable devastation. The pole shift we're talking about here. Studies have shown that at 10,000 years BC, the celestial pole was inclined at the angle of 30 degrees from its present position. This is, in turn, strongly suggests that the terrestrial axis then orientated differently from today. The gigantic worldwide tectonic disturbances of the late Pleistocene times occurred almost simultaneously on a near unimaginable scale, I should say, precisely what could be expected from a powerful external influence, but not from the Ice Age conditions conventionally believed. This is from a book you all should get called When the Earth Nearly Died. I have it abstracted in my dossier, so don't worry about it. Then the Tahoe, not far from here, the Tahoe Indians are saying, there was a time when their tribe possessed the whole earth and were strong and numerous and rich. But a day came when a people rose up stronger than they and defeated and enslaved them. Afterward, the Great Spirit sent an immense wave across the continent from the sea, and this wave engulfed both the oppressors, look at that last line, both the oppressors and the oppressed, leaving only a very small remnant. Very suggestive that. Plato says, in one day and one fatal night, there came the mighty earthquakes and inundations that engulfed that warlike peoples. Look at this references. That debris that fell in from Tiamat, plus the earth change, the earth pole shift, that is what sank those 5 or 4 continents I've been telling you about. Our planet had hardly any water on it at all. It only had what was called the Miocene Ocean, which is where the Baltic is now. You know where the Dead Sea and Caspian Sea, most of Russia, was an ocean, granted. And there's probably some other water here and there. All these scholars are still wondering how the Indians got over to there and how the Egyptians got over to South America. There was no bloody water, so all you had to do was walk. Right? But I tell you, when those continents, Appalachia, Tyrrhenia, Oceania, Beringia, Fennoscandia, when that debris fell in, that is what put these continents thousands and thousands of fathoms under the oceans that we have today. You know the fear of water that some people have, the fear of oceans? It's for a reason. Those ain't even our waters. When you look at the ocean, you're looking at Tiamat. What was left of it. John, the Bible. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. See? The reference is to no more water, or water, and the fact that the earth was born again as the ocean subsided from the next continents, implying that the seawater covered everything at one time. And yeah, our human fears and phobias. Fear of darkness, caves and hollow places, of water, of heights, of loneliness, of insects and certain animals, enclosed spaces, foreigners. You know, the psychologist is going to say, well, you know, that's just the way the mind is. We have psychological fears. Hey, what would happen if those are physiological, racial memories? See, again, I don't believe that nature and the human mind is that, is that messed up, right? So that, slip into my Irish a bit, that does this to us. We're not plagued by just, you know, psychological Freudian problems for no reason. There's research now that proves that this is physiological. Well, look, if it only happened 50,000 years ago, that's a dot in time. You know, in the phylological timeline, the phylogenetic timeline, that is an extremely short period of time. When you're cowering, when your forefathers are cowering in caves, watching the universe be destroyed around them, I think you're going to remember that. So when you see certain insects or see water or have dreams, right, etc., 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 it's right there in the back of your consciousness. But when we've talked about it, the leaders put it down. Oh, well, you know, let's get Freud out, or let's get somebody, wheel them out and give an explanation for this. They'll do anything. Even if it doesn't hold water, any of these philosophies or truths, they'll do it anyway because they just don't want you to look at what it really might be. Julian Jaynes, an amazing author, American, author of The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, another book that's a must. He claimed that this period, thousands of years ago, was a time of intense psychosis for the emerging human race. Okay, so it's physiological. Remembrance in our minds. But what was the variable? The variable was the destruction of the earth. But in that destruction of the earth, think of how it would have affected those people. Right? Millions of the serpent race would have been destroyed. Not millions of them. Millions of our earth people. Say there was about 2,000 original alien visitors. Just let's take a number, right? How many do you think of those people were left? Probably 50. Of maybe several thousand sons of the serpent people, maybe only 2,000 of them were left. How many were left of the Adamic entourage that they took with them? Who knows? But what was much, 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 much more a greater loss to these aliens was in this war and the earth changes and the deluge, they lost their technological hardware. You know, they were still digging it up, you know. And then they sequester it, just like they show you in Indiana Jones. They're calling them children's toys and what have you. You know, it's all buried under there. But they lost it. And now, they were trapped. Maybe they had a couple of devices and so on, and they had it all in here, but in here is no good to a technologically advanced race. Remember, their whole thing was that they were technologically advanced. When the Earth did this, it destroyed all their hardware, or most of their hardware. All the computers, all the supercomputers, all the technologies that they had, all the weapons of power, their spaceships, the lot, the computers, everything gone. They suffered.